A pleasure to meet y'all at last, and welcome back once again to some more films I'm willing to talk about again. Well, for this instance, we are getting towards the very end of Films I'm Willing to Talk About Again, Season 2. I intend to do another 5 more episodes. Why don't we get started by talking about another piece of the year 2006? The movie in particular that I'm hoping to, in fact, cover once again after all these years is, in fact, The Ant Bully. Yep. Another animated film of 2006. Another piece that Warner Brothers had brought to us. And of course, a movie that pertains a lot of memories in my heart. Mainly because it was one of the first times that I've had a smaller theater occupied. And The Ant Bully wasn't necessarily a big film, but by Warner Brothers as well as Playtone standards, it does hold out in its own unique way. Starring the likes of Nicolas Cage, Julia Roberts, and centering on a young boy whom has been bullied and mistreated by certain members of the neighborhood, if you will. Basically, an entire group of kids, they pester him and nickname him the Almighty Peanut. Yeah. As silly as the idea is, the idea of, let's say, bugs getting around again. After all, this was not the first time that there were animated bugs. Remember Pixar's A Bug's Life, as well as DreamWorks' Ants? Yeah, they were basically predecessors to what we have here. And The Ant Bully does give me similar vibes to how animated insects get around and allow life to flourish in their own unique way. But on the basis of ants, a close and personal examination from us viewers of what they do in their daily lives. They gather food, carry around objects, and travel around in their unique caverns that they construct themselves. All the while dealing with what they refer to as the Destroyer. And who is the Destroyer? Well, it's that kid, Peanut. But his name is actually Lucas Nickel. And just as I've said before, he gets pestered around by the kids, and he actually is considered the Destroyer because, believe it or not, he takes out his aggressions from all the trauma he's had, the underwear that's been destroyed, and the jokes that have been laid out on him by grabbing hold of a water gun and blasting a nearby ant mound. This very same ant mound is in fact home to a certain ant colony which has its own queen, which we'll get to in a moment. There is also the witch doctor known as Zoc. He's the kind of man that performs a lot of witchcraft and wizardry and is in fact responsible for creating some sort of formula. And while he does try to recite this ritual, he unfortunately doesn't go so well. Hova, his girlfriend, played by Julia Roberts, is in fact entitled on allowing him to succeed, but believes that he is going a little too far in his research and should probably take a break. After some messing about, conversations start to take place, and while Zoc is determined to find the remaining ingredients needed to complete his project, trembles start to take place. And these tremors are coming from the surface. None other than blasts from a water gun that Lucas Nickel had found after being pestered by the bullies. And well, as we heard from the leader of the pack, well, Lucas basically recites those same words to the ant, stating, "What are you gonna do about it? Nothing. Because I'm big and you're small." Of course, Zoc is more than determined to try and stop him with his own powers, but is not content on trying enough. It's basically just a good sign of inferiority that he has yet to truly learn about. But in any case though, they try to make a run for it, and after some devastation and some pounding, Lucas eventually is called back inside by his mother, whom, again, that's where the name Peanut tends to come in. And even though he does make it back inside, the ants are sure to question about the future. Of course, this wouldn't be the last time that Lucas would attack the mound and the colony within. But until that happens, what we're left with is Lucas sitting behind a chair and playing a video game called Frog Flyers. His mother goes up to him and tells him about a trip that the parents are having and that his older sister, as well as his grandmother, are going to be taking care of him until they get back. Of course, Lucas is not content on the idea that his parents are leaving, and even more so, his mother just happened to call him Peanut again, and yeah, it's definitely a surefire way to realize that the poor boy is troubled and might need some help. He's not only got bullies to worry about, but then of course, you got the electronics. I mean, keep in mind, this was before a majority of people owned smartphones. But hey, by 2006, a lot of people were already addicted to certain electronic entertainment. Game Boys, PlayStations, all that stuff. Even PC gamers were out there all around the world by this point. Anyways though, once his grandmother does arrive, well, we are left to have a whole lot of fans. Because she apparently believes that if aliens are going to come around, they're going to touch down on Earth, wind power is supposedly their weakness. It's that kind of senility that we would generally expect from the elderly, especially someone like her. And of course, we can't forget the fact that she's one of those elderly persons whom has artificial teeth. Dentures, if you will. And I really ought to stress the fact that this gag where her teeth fly out and end up touching the ground, it happens more often than you think. And like I said, there's plenty of moments that surely won't stop until you stop watching it or you see the end of the film. But yeah, this is just one idea of many things that you can expect that they tend to recycle all the way through. Anyways though, the following day comes around, and while the ants are once again discussing things as it is, Zoc supposedly has his formula put together, and the ritual being complete, he decides to try to spread the word about it to people. Unfortunately, water has entered the colony. Massive flash flooding has impacted the entirety of the tunnel system. And well, it's Lucas again. This time he's using a garden hose to drench the ant mound and cover the whole thing with water. Until he is spooked by a man behind him. Well, this man happens to be a bug exterminator, Stan Beals. And mind you that, he is a real creep to Lucas. But in any case though, Beals does encourage Lucas to, in fact, encourage his manhood to come up and sign a contract. A contract that in fact is going to dedicate to the ant mound being destroyed and handled by Beal personally. Well, of course, while that's taken care of, we are left with a drenched ant mound. Thankfully, the ants happen to survive. And while they're not exactly appreciative of the idea, Zoc thankfully has good news to share. This formula is guaranteed to change Lucas into something different. The following night comes by, everybody is sound asleep. Well, except for the grandma, but we'll get to her in a bit. Zoc and some ants proceed to go inside the house, the Nickel family themselves, while they're asleep. They go up the wall, and it's a unique first-person perspective from a worm's eye perspective of how we could basically see ants crawling from inside the house. It's a pretty surreal experience, further hampered by the fact that there was a lightning storm outside and some wind. And if that's not enough, well, like I said, the ants do make their way to Lucas's room. Zoc stands on top of Lucas's ear while he is asleep, and for some reason his Frog Flyers game is just on. Maybe he fell asleep while trying to beat his high score, who knows. Anyways, Zoc takes his potion, tilts it over, and a drop splashes into Lucas's ear, traveling down his canal, and we basically just fade to black. But then, boom, Lucas wakes up to the sound of thunder to find out that his world is a bit different. But then, the shocking twist. He finds out that his underwear is giant. It turns out that Zoc's formula actually shrunk him down to an ant-size person. If that's not enough, the Frog Flyers game is right there, and it scares him. He falls off the bed and lands in a bag of potato chips that happen to spill out and with him inside, on top of one of the chips. It breaks up. He tries to think about what had happened. But then the voice of Zok comes by. As we know, he wears glasses. So when Lucas sees that there's a giant ant in one of his glasses lens, obviously he's freaked out. You know? Talk about the bully getting his just desserts. Then, of course, they do take him. And Grandma is unfortunately spooked as well, but not by the ants, but by alarms that happen in the room. Grabbing her fan to defend herself and eventually growing out with a pair of binoculars to find out the source of this disturbance. She eventually does come across the ants, and using a focus lens, she actually sees Lucas with them. And boy, that's pretty much it for her for the night. Yeah, so it's basically Lucas's fate being sealed right at that moment. And it almost comes at a point where we do start to cheer for the ants at this point, because Lucas did cause a lot of trouble to them by this point. And we can understand that he has had a lot of trouble himself, but we all know that violence was never the answer to begin with. So, what do we have here? We have the group of ants take Lucas to the top of the ant mound. He looks down the hole and realizes that it's much deeper than he would have expected. Zok gives him the final push, literally speaking, for Lucas to fall down and be granted a lot of greetings by ants, but not in the most positive way possible. It eventually goes off to the point where he is in fact escorted, kind of, by the rest of the ants into the throne room in which their queen is in. Of course, Lucas is not at all welcomed by the colony. And yeah, it really is the point where he basically sees society in front of him distraught and devastated by his arrival. Like I said, he was not welcome inside the colony. However, the meeting with the queen was meant to take place. And well, as he sees in front of him, well, the queen ant comes out and states that a certain guest is among them. The group does go through some arguments on how they should handle Lucas, but the queen herself has a different plan. They could attempt to change his nature so that way he could possibly be a better person. And the best way to do that, the course of action in general, is to turn him into an ant. Yep. Not exactly something that we would see or hear every day, but it is what it is. The queen has made up her mind, and Lucas is to become an ant, if he has ever wanted to have any hope of getting out of there. In one piece at least. The following morning comes by, and while Lucas is snooping around, trying to avoid contact with the ants, Hova ain't far behind. And once they do cross paths with each other, Lucas, of course, is pretty irritated about what had happened, and he really is more than bent on trying to get out of there rather than just deal with this punishment that he has to deal with. Of course, Hova is more willing to abide by the queen's command rather than just allow Lucas to get his way, but we know that she can be on the more lenient side. She is, after all, what you might know as the more caring and thoughtful character, if you will. A well-supporting individual, if you will. While Zok, like I said, he is pretty mad at Lucas for what he has done to the colony and the damage he's caused over the years, possibly more so. In the end, though, everything that led up to this point sure has had a lot of story behind it. Eventually, Hova and Lucas make their way outside the mound, where they would meet up with a certain team. Well, this team, of course, is led by a duo of ants known by the name of Fugax and Kriya. Kriya and Fugax are in fact responsible for educating the youth ants into learning about human culture, including the Great Flat Rock, or the street as Lucas corrects them, as well as giant metal cocoons, which Lucas also proofreads them as cars. Obviously Fugax, whom is played by Bruce Campbell, by the way, is not very happy about Lucas's philosophy on things. So, yeah, Fugax is definitely a crazy, funny man, if you will. And I'm glad that Campbell was the man that they chose to have around for this moment. While Krila was in fact given an entirely different voice entirely. Regina King, to be exact. And like I said, there's definitely a lot of things that we should expect around here, apart from a nice cast out there. Nick Cage, Julia Roberts, Bruce Campbell, Meryl Streep, Paul Giamatti, and many more. We do have more things to come. But here's where we come to probably one of the biggest plot points that I've seen. Basically, there are two teams for the ant youth. Lucas is assigned to the blue team, while the red team is all ants. Their main goal is to get to the Sweet Rock, which is a Jelly Belly jelly bean. A grape-flavored Jelly Belly jelly bean. Yep. This movie technically happens to be its own sort of product placement with the Jelly Belly Jelly Bean Company. And fun fact, if you're ever around here in the state of Wisconsin, there is in fact an actual Jelly Belly Jelly Bean factory where they give tours. And they happen to have Ant Bully out there on the TV screens. Just because Jelly Belly and Warner Brothers happen to have a bit of a sponsorship with each other at that time, and basically acted as a product placement for the movie. And well, this was, believe it or not, the first time that I got to know about Jelly Belly, and more so when you understand the fact that I've consumed thousands of those beans over the years that passed. Anyways though, Lucas fails the mission, the red team wins, and Hova and Lucas decide to make their way back. She is not too happy about the decisions he's made, but he's even more irritated on the fact that he obviously is not ant-worthy, and discouraged by the fact that he can't climb like an ant, so what's really the point to him? But here's a really big plot point here. A bit of a twist, if you will. She becomes stunned for a moment, not responding to Lucas and kind of being a little creepy, if you will. However, the reason being is because there is actually a disturbance going on. A herd, if you will, which Lucas doesn't know about, is being attacked by a series of wasps. These wasps, for whatever reason, are basically attacking the likes of the ants and stealing some resources from them. I guess you could say they're sort of like pirates or ravagers who want nothing more than bloodlust and treasure. But of course, it does get pretty ugly right then and there. And I will say that the wasps are pretty well designed and kind of intimidating by most ways. Kind of what you would expect from a character or series of characters, a race worth of characters even, that technically act like pirates. You know? Vikings, marauders, yeah, whatever kind of terminology you hope to place on them. They're that kind of character with those kind of personalities in mind. As for Lucas and Hova though, even Zoc ends up joining in on the scene. And while Zoc and Hova technically give different commands to Lucas, Lucas decides to go with Hova's plan of going into the grass rather than trying to save her from the wasps that are trying to take her away. Zoc's obviously surprised at what Lucas decided to do. But even more so when you get to know the fact that Lucas apparently isn't safe in the grass. Yeah, wasps are stalking him. One actually does come up to him, but thankfully, Lucas comes across an old stick of dynamite. Yeah, if you remember earlier in the film, the bullies actually tossed a stick of dynamite his way, and while it didn't blow up, it was very close. All Lucas had to do was to light the fuse again using sunlight from a nearby glass pane, which, keep in mind, this is the same sort of technique that we've seen on Woody from Toy Story, for instance. Magnifying glasses, or glass as a whole, can magnify sunbeams. And when that happens, well, Lucas's arm gets burned at one point, But this amplified sunbeam also had the power to light the fuse. And you know, that's something I've always been curious about. Could you actually light a fuse on a stick of dynamite just by aiming the sunbeam towards it with a sheet of glass or something? Could you actually pull that off? I mean, it does take a lot of heat, plus an ignition source and some fuel in order to get a fuse to light up, where it can eventually blow up. However, it does work, and the wasp's stinger gets stuck in the stick, and Lucas obviously makes a run for it. The stick blows up, practically in Zoc's face, and the wasps are alerted by the presence of explosive devices. They make a retreat, letting go of all the ants and resources that they attempted to steal. The ants have won the day, and all because of what Lucas had done. So, talk about the beginning of a big redemption arc here. I mean, Hova was not only impressed, but so were Fugax, and so were some of the others. In fact, they were all cheering on his nickname, Peanut, Peanut. Well, the following night, they call for a celebration, a little snack called Honeydew, in which the ants try out. Even Lucas tries one out for himself, which apparently tastes like green apple flavored bubblegum, and he becomes addicted to that stuff almost immediately. And so, Fugax does request another serving to be made. Lucas sees that it apparently is produced from a giant worm's anus. Wow. Like, even I was not expecting that to happen. Imagine eating something delicious that happened to come from someplace disgusting. I mean, where did Cheetos come from, for instance? Or McNuggets? Anyways, Lucas is sickened by what he's seeing. Therefore, Hova decides to offer him a little present. It's basically a piece of yucca root, a little thing that Zoc had around for some of his experiments. This root, in fact, when infused with regular dew, is in fact supposed to help Lucas heal these ailments, and also tend to his sickness. When he does try it out, he lets out a massive belch that can be heard even from outside the mound. The guards say, "Praise the mother." As we know, praise the mother is the saying that the ants in the colony all state. The mother, pretty much referring to the queen. But of course, after all that's done, they decide to go exploring a bit, teaching Lucas about the history of the colony at hand, and also the Cloud Breather. Yeah. It basically is a lot like the Exterminator that Lucas apparently had hired just a few days prior to take out the ant mound and the colony within. Lucas realized he made a mistake here and had to go back home, coming up with the idea to restock the ants' colony with some extra food. Sweet rocks in general. So, you've heard that right. That grape jelly bean wasn't the only thing that they were going to offer in this film, but rather a whole bunch of them. And well, the morning would come by again. They would all make their way to Lucas's house. They would get around the shag carpet by flying around the living room using the fan. And of course, making their way to the kitchen counter, they would find these sweet rocks. The jelly beans, if you will, sitting there waiting to be taken. And so, obviously we know that everybody has their own personal favorites. Krila, for instance, happens to like the red ones. What are the red ones? Well, they can include anything like the cherry or strawberry or cinnamon flavored. I mean, there's a ton of red colored Jelly Belly jelly beans out there by today's standards. Fugax obviously disagrees and is not a fan of the red ones, and boy, they do get into a bit of a heated argument there. Krila, of course, goes so far to try and pull out his antennas. However, things do get ugly once again. Lucas's big sister comes back into the house, realizing that he might be in his room playing his video game again, and then goes into the kitchen to see that there are ants on the table, all the while trying to contact someone on the cell phone. Yeah, this phone in the house is apparently used as a weapon to take out Fugax. It narrowly misses him a few times, and it's a unique little thing going on where the bigger the object, the slower they seem. Obviously, from our perspective, from our own height standpoints and whatnot, she's like normal sized, but not so much to the ants. We do, of course, get to hear a dial tone take place, harkening back to a time where there were operators on the line and there were people that used to handle these things from way out there in the distance. The grandmother, however, intercepts everything and just ends the call. Now, what was the call made for exactly? Well, Lucas apparently had the bright idea of contacting the exterminator, but ends up calling a pizza place instead. They somehow believe his case, and it seems that he has the affirmation necessary that the exterminator is officially out, and the deal is off. The contract is over and done with. However, he just doesn't realize that it was a pizza place he contacted instead. But we'll talk more about that later. Anyways, though, the ants and Lucas make their way out through the garbage disposal, and Grandma, of course, knows that Lucas is with them. But we know that the sister doesn't believe a thing she's saying, believing she's senile as all hell. Even more so, this is another moment where we get to see Grandma's teeth fall out right in the disposal. Yeah, like I said, it's a unique series of things that are going down. Quite a series of events that play out, and by Warner Brothers standards, an animated film from 2006 sure had gone off pretty well. However, when the following dusk comes around and the moonlight begins to shine, a little thing begins to take place with Lucas and Zoc. Zoc has to explain to him why he's not really a fan of him or his actions. And frogs show up. Yeah. Talk about all these different things happening in the span of a few days. I mean, Lucas has had to deal with so much in this whole time since the bullies. I mean, apart from the bullies, he's had to deal with his sister, his parents, his grandma, who was crazy about aliens. He's had to deal with ants that shrunk him down to their own size, then took him down to the colony. He's had to deal with the queen, who believes that he should become an ant. He's had to deal with Hova, who drags him out over to some competition, which he lost, by the way, and then encountered a bunch of wasps in which that he ended up saving the day for. And then, of course, the disgusting and not so sightly thing about it known as the honeydew feast. Plus all the crap that went down in the house in just that one day they were there. So, talk about a lot worth taking in. Now they have frogs. But even worse, just when Lucas thought he was actually going to make it by climbing on top of a soda can, using his climbing power, he slips and falls back down. The frog manages to grab him just when he thought he was able to get away with it. The frog eats him alive. Gosh, that is unbelievable. Kind of terrifying, actually. However, though, it turns out that Lucas actually is still alive. He was swallowed by the frog and is now sitting inside the stomach alongside some other bugs. You got a beetle, a glowworm, and a fly. The frog, of course, eventually stumbles upon Zoc and eats him alive as well. Both Zoc and Lucas are in fact able to stick around for some time, eventually being vomited out of the frog. The beetle and glowworm get out, but the fly ain't so lucky. And once everybody reunites with each other, they eventually decide to try and make things right for the colony, for everybody around. Because the following morning, you know what happens? The exterminator shows up. Stan Beals is out and about for action. Lucas basically thought that he was rid of with that phone call that he made yesterday. But it didn't happen. We know what really happened, right? The phone number that he typed in was actually for a pizza place. And even though the business card had the phone number on it, he just didn't quite dial it in correctly. So Beals is ready for action. And basically, it's over for the colony. They have no way of getting out of there. That is, until an alliance is made with the wasps. Lucas is able to convince them not only the ants are in danger, but possibly the wasps. Because, after all, when he was normal size, Lucas himself did see Stan at his best trying to deal with wasps that came around, especially when that cigar smoke just came around. But the alliance is made. The wasps do agree to help the ants defeat Stan and help save their colony. And while it's not entirely easy at first, they do find that working together actually helps to solve quite a crisis on their hands. Beals is not only out there trying to get things together, but the fact is, dealing with ants, dealing with the tiny Lucas, and dealing with a bunch of wasps proves to be kind of difficult. Spraying smoke all over the place, spraying all kinds of weapons in his hands. Who would have thought he would have been such a formidable antagonist? A crazy, somewhat creepy exterminator. But you know what the real thing is here? The real deal? Towards the end of the film, what we get to see here is an epic conclusion. Quite possibly one of the most zany and humorous ways to take down a mighty foe of this magnitude. Well, what happens is that Lucas basically comes up with the clear shot. And how does that work? Well, remember that formula that was used to shrink Lucas down to ant size? Well, Zok was able to apply it to their wasp's stinger. And as we also saw, Lucas was actually able to save the wasp by climbing up the mailbox. Yep, he climbed up like an ant, impressing the likes of Hova herself. But back to the stinger. The stinger is coated, and Zok issues the goodbye kiss, thrusting the stinger into Stan, especially after he was already bitten by that beetle we saw earlier, carrying the glowworm with. And well, when that happens, the stinger causes Stan to actually shrink. Not exactly like how Lucas did, but still, so small, he can't even get into his own van for safety while the rest of the wasps come after him. He finds a nearby trike, but even that proves to be difficult. He just can't get away from those wasps. They marauder him, and that's the end of a certain tale. A tale of how a boy called an exterminator, but has a change of heart after what he saw down in that colony. And it's quite a redemption arc, if you will, turning a somewhat helpless boy into a courageous warrior. So much so that he actually rebels against the bullies. More so, basically the leader of the pack. The rest of the kids do invite him to come over and play after they issue a dog pile on their own leader instead. And well, Lucas, however, in spite of his parents coming back from a nice big trip and his grandma being impressed at his birthday suit being revealed after he grew back to normal size, yeah, Lucas basically made his promise to send food to the colony, pouring Jelly Belly jelly beans down at them. And as we hear from a unique series of credits complete with drawings, basically, reminiscent of Lucas and the ants that we had just seen, it's a unique series of arts that are put together to kick off the ending of such a unique piece of 2006 history. And while it's nowhere near the success of other big films from that time, like Cars or Everyone's Hero, all of us can agree that by Warner Brothers standards, they did a pretty good job with this one. And it had such a nice cast, the animation was stunning, and there was plenty of zany, humorous moments that would really reel you in. And plenty of people would agree, having Jelly Belly jelly beans brings about a unique connection. As I've said before though, Jelly Belly practically has this movie in their backs, even to this day. I'm sure next time if I were to visit that Jelly Belly factory, which is some distance from my house, I'm sure they'll still have this movie up and running. Unless other films have come by and decided to put up Jelly Belly jelly beans in their own bags, whether it's a sponsorship or a paid promotion or whatnot. Ant Bully is without a doubt something that I've always remembered since 2006. In many possible ways, it does bring back loads of memories. And the year 2006 in general had lots of things going for it in my life. That same year was the point where I started grade school, going from kindergarten to first grade. And after that point, history was made in the books. And 12 whole years worth of school in my time, with 2 extra years, for various reasons. It was all made possible because of the year 2006. Age 7 I was at that time, and I sure do hope that nobody ever forgets about 2006 for many other things. But you know what? It is what it is. And the Ant Bully gets itself a nice scoring of 8.3 out of 10.1. While it's no masterpiece, they did what they could for the time. And they also did plenty to make us happy. And I myself am more than just captivated by what it was able to accomplish. And while it's nothing that special compared to other animated films, this was a big piece of CG in which everybody was trying to get in on the CGI act. Because by this point, everybody was hoping to get a scoring on CG rather than the usual drawn-on animation of the old days. But you know what though? I'll have some more stuff to worry about from here on out though. So make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side for more.
Whatever I want, I usually get, and I'm thinking I want you, but I don't have you yet. I ain't got no tricks,